Have you ever heard about this little anime called Frieren? You know, nothing special, just some generic fantasy anime.
Jesus Christ.
Frieren-sama.
Yes, this anime just came and took us all by surprise, exceeding all expectations and conquering our hearts as well as every single anime chart available. You clicked on the video, you've seen the show. You know it's amazing, everybody knows it's amazing. So I don't want to waste the time by gushing over its overall qualities, because it's just a given at this point, and there isn't much left to be said as praises go. But what I want to talk about instead is an aspect of the anime that is often left out of the conversation and overshadowed by the great narrative, storytelling, and characters, and that is the magic system. Because I have already seen the majority of this show months ago, and now a week has passed since I finished the last couple episodes, but there are aspects of the world building and the presentation of magic usage that I just can't get out of my mind, and I keep coming back to it, because it's just so unique in a very subtle way. The magic in Frieren is presented in a way that is very similar to the show itself. It can look very generic and surface level at first glance, but the more you watch it, the more you realize that ultimately it's not the hype of the flashy combat, or the super complex, over-explained power scaling that will make your magic memorable. It can help for sure, but the things you will remember after weeks or months of finishing the series will be the small and quiet moments that aren't necessarily catching your attention right then when you first see them, because they just blend in so well with the world and the story, so seamlessly, and feel so natural when the characters explain it. It is the mundanity and just how ordinary it is that makes them so special. The best example I can give you for this is in episode 3, where they finally fight the previously sealed Demon Lord Qual. There they explain that the attack he uses was particularly deadly against humans, because they didn't have the proper knowledge yet to counter it. But after they learned about it, and the demon was sealed away, they started to study its magic, and they didn't just create the perfect defensive magic to counter it, but they also learned to use the attack itself, perfected it, and implemented it into their own magical skill set. That's why Fern was so surprised when his underwhelmingly weak attacks were so easily blocked by her basic defense spell. It was barely half an episode worth of a storyline, and I didn't really think much about it at first watch. But later on I had to realize just how strong of an impression this little scene left on me. Having a magical obstacle that humanity needs to overcome, and then their immediate answer to it is just coming together to make a collective effort and tasking scientists and academics all around the world to research the problem and develop proper countermeasures. That is a very simple and straightforward way to write it. And yet, I have never seen something like this before. It's just so unceremonial, so unsatisfying in a way, but at the same time it's such a beautiful statement about the power, endurance, and resourcefulness of humankind, and a testament to the fact that if we really work together and put in the time and the effort, there's nothing we can't eventually overcome, even if it takes 100 small steps that at the moment feel very insignificant by themselves. That is something that is perfectly in line with the mindset of the show, and the messaging it holds throughout its characters, starting right from Flamme, Frieren's master, who was one of the greatest mages in history, but still wasn't able to defeat the Demon King by herself. But what she could do instead was to kickstart humanity's efforts to learn and integrate magic into their society, so that decades later down the line, they could have the right knowledge and abilities to rival the demons. And doing the same thing with a single apprentice as well, who later on becomes the one who delivers the final blow with her team, turning the tides of war to humanity's favor at last. Even Frieren herself believes that defeating the Demon King isn't supposed to be her greatest feat, but to witness and aid humanity to the point where their potential in magic starts to overgrow the demons, and even the elves themselves, signaling the start of the age of humankind. And that's what she sees in Fern. That is a sentiment that even Serie can get behind to some extent, constantly searching for an apprentice who can one day finally match her potential and go beyond it. That constant feeling of progress earned so naturally, one step at a time, is the reason why I appreciate it so much more than a singular very loud and cathartic hype moment, where the otherwise weaker protagonist who wouldn't stand a chance normally at the brink of death suddenly unlocks their inner potential and overwhelming abilities with the power of friendship, dramatic music, and a quick side trip into a cheesy flashback. And don't get me wrong, I enjoy those type of shows just as much when I'm in the mood for it. I just wanted to emphasize how rare it is to see something like that in the anime genre, and how happy it makes me to see it every now and then. Another good example of the subtle implementation of magic into the story is the plot point of keeping your maximum mana output hidden from other magic users in order for them to underestimate you in battle. This is also something that gets established very early on, with Flamme presenting it to baby Frieren during her quick encounter against the demons, and later we see how Frieren and Fern respectively use this technique to surprise and defeat their opponents. Again, it's a very simple concept, it's easy to understand, and it's a good way to show power scaling between characters. It brings a bit of technicality into the magic system, and it looks cool visually. The show takes its time to build up this idea and familiarize the audience with it. Over time, we learn that it takes great effort and decades, if not centuries of practice, to keep your mana output in check constantly, but even then, your consciously reduced magical aura will inevitably have these little micro-vibrations in its output, and depending on how great of a mage you are and how well-trained the other person who's hiding it is, you might be able to pick up on that. Then, we can also see that to keep up appearances, Frieren chooses to hide only a portion of her mana, to still appear noticeably stronger than your regular mage, because having the reputation she has, people would naturally assume that her output should be beyond what they usually encounter. And that gives them that false sense of security in their knowledge, that this is the maximum that she's capable of. It makes sense, right? It's very simplistic. We slowly get through the series having this concept constantly in the back of our mind without ever really thinking too much about it. That is until we get to the final episodes, where we meet with Serie again, as she comes to personally oversee the final selection. This is the first time we ever really see her leave that giant hall she always sits in, and interact with other mages. So, we're naturally curious what she's like. We've never seen her fight, or do any magic as a matter of fact, up to this point. We know she's supposed to be very strong, somewhere on the level of Frieren, or maybe a bit above her, considering we just saw Frieren relatively easily destroy her supposedly indestructible barrier just a couple episodes ago. And then, the episode immediately reassures us in those beliefs when they show us visually that indeed, her mana is around full power Frieren, only a bit higher. They even say it in the dialogue to make it even clearer. So you're just naturally guided into this idea of her, up until the moment when it is revealed to us that she's been using the same mana-suppressing technique the whole time, only one step above Frieren. Because while her suppressed power is on a similar level than a highly skilled and powerful human mage, Serie's suppressed power alone is on the peak Frieren level. That scene just completely blew me away when I saw it, and again, not because it was a dramatic grand reveal or anything, but because they just fooled me so blatantly, so effortlessly, to the point where it almost gets embarrassing to think about it. Just how the in-universe characters react to a reveal like that when Frieren or Fern does it. I didn't have the slightest idea until she told it, because even though I had all the puzzle pieces to take into account that they showed and taught us during the show, I didn't consider it, because I just assumed instinctively that she has no reason to do this. Why would she bother? And that is exactly the point. That is exactly what all of Frieren's enemies ever thought as well, and that's why she can catch them off guard all the time so effectively. So simple, but such an incredible way of writing, that I just can't get over it. There is one other aspect of the magic system that is emphasized throughout the show. What is the basis of doing magic in Frieren's world? And that is imagination, and the idea that you can't do something if you can't properly visualize it in your mind first. Another simple and easy to understand system that seems very generic and bare bones at first, but the show's writing shines again with this one, gradually planting this knowledge and way of thinking into the viewers. Starting from the early episodes, where Frieren has to see a real flower first for her to be able to recreate it later, to then introducing this idea into higher and higher concepts. For example, how Serie couldn't have killed the Demon King because she just can't picture a world that is in constant peace. It would be just too boring for her. Or at least that's how I interpreted. The show isn't that clear with this one. Maybe she totally could have, she just never felt like it. But someone in the show mentioned at some point that she couldn't have done it even if she wanted to, so I'm not sure. It also ties back really nicely into the idea of repressing your mana for a diversion, giving your opponent a false sense of security and confidence, and then completely shatter them later when the reveal happens. And this idea reached its peak when we got introduced to Übel, our favorite resident psycho waifu, who isn't the most powerful mage around when it comes to raw power output, but despite that, she completely obliterates her first exam supervisor, and later on the sense clone, almost effortlessly, just because how her powers work together with her imagination. That was when I realized what the goal of the creators was when creating this system and how they want to implement it into the story and the world going forward. It creates a kind of power distribution between the characters, where they can have good or bad matchups, depending on who the opponents are, despite their individual talent or skill set, in a sort of rock, paper, scissors-like way. That helps the fight stay dynamic and interesting, and less predictable than a simple power chart, where the more mana and better training you have, the objectively favorable you are. Yet another perfect introduction and implementation of a system that doesn't need any huge, overstimulated, adrenaline-filled battle sequence to showcase it, because the idea itself and the usage of it in the writing and through the character interactions makes it so effective and memorable that it just sticks in your head. And you don't need any perfect explanation for it either. They make the system just as clear and transparent as it needs to be, for you to easily grasp the basic logic of it. The anime uses a soft magic system, meaning that it's not that meticulously explored and specified how these spells and magical abilities work exactly, and what can and can't be done with magic. What if Frieren sees a picture of the flower she tries to recreate, but it's a slightly off drawing with the wrong colors and proportions? Would the spell just not work at all? Or would she create an enraged abomination of a flower creature by accident? Can you even teach other people spells, you know? Or do you need to show them the exec book or scroll you learned it from? Why is cleaning your clothes such a rare and legendary spell exactly? I would guess it's not that hard to imagine having some clean clothing, so it shouldn't be that hard of a spell, no? And how does Übel's advantage work in her own mind? Is she aware of the fact how big of a power boost one's imagination can give? And if so, does she intentionally place herself into the mindset that she'll just win anyway? Or is she just a little dum-dum in the head and can't comprehend the difference between her and her opponent's innate power difference? And that's why she subconsciously tricks her brain with her simpleton logic into winning the fight. Or maybe a bit both. We don't know, and we don't really need to know. This is no Avatar or Full Metal Alchemist. We don't have to have perfect understanding about everything to enjoy it. The creators made sure that the things that are important are conveyed clearly and efficiently through the brilliant writing, and we're just along for the ride. Overall, I think it was Übel who said it the best, what Frieren is really about, and what I like about the magic system as well.
ヒンメルの逸話はいくらでも残っている。宣教の塔の攻略、七宝剣、不死なるベーゼやガキの頃の俺はそんな冒険探が大好きだった。わかったよ。確かに。宣教の塔もベーゼも光極竜も俺の村には関係ねえわな。みんな日々の生活を守るので手一杯だ。きっと勇者ヒンメルが俺の村に来なかったら世界が平和になってもそこに俺の村はなかったんだろうな。俺をここまで連れてきたのは勇者ヒンメルのくだらない冒険探だ。
And the funny thing is, Frieren does have those flashy hype moments in fights as well. And when it comes to those scenes, it presents them just as exceptionally. But ultimately, however good these events are, these won't be the ones that make this show memorable in the long run. It will be the little moments that didn't hit hard because of spectacle, but because of the ideas, the creativity, the smart writing, and the heart that was put into all of it. And this is why these moments will be the #1 reason why I will remember this beautiful show. Forever. Okay, maybe #2.